Hi everyone, this is Tanette, and in this video I am sharing with you an experience I've been through in relation to my transition from judgment to non-judgment. And I mean, for me, I have, in and throughout my life, in being committed and dedicated to this process of becoming more self-aware, which is essentially about understanding my relationship with my own thoughts, emotions, my inner happenings, my relationship with my body, and how that, translates and manifests into everyday life moments. So, within that journey and process, I've always likened it to, what I've learned from another, which I found quite relevant and applicable, is like that of an onion, as you go through life, through phases of life, through experiences, relationships, the coming and goings. You transition, you evolve, you expand, you change. There's always that dynamic of the constancy of change, and as change also happens, so also does the sometimes breaking down, where you lose things, whether relationships or aspects of yourself or actual things in your life. And you go through a lost and found inside yourself. Um, the traumas, the difficulties, the challenges. And out of that, though, so out of the, let's call it, for lack of a better word, the experiences that one would define as the good and the bad, it's like an onion that is peeled, the layers of an onion. And throughout your life, you go through these layers of realization, awareness, understanding, insight, and you get to moments of maturity, wisdom, deep understanding, humbleness. So, my process with judgment and this realization of judgment and non-judgment is quite similar to that. So, I've throughout my life if we look at judgment as an onion, walked through many varying dimensions of judgment and understanding it, grasping it. Many, for example, when I, over months or years, start adding more realizations or insight into judgment, like let's say I initially started off with purely focusing on self-judgment, and I suddenly have this awesome realization and light bulb coming up about self-judgment and how that comes out in my behavior towards others, and how I can attract, if you will, people into my life who's also very self-judgmental, and how we can perpetuate that issue within one another instead of helping ourselves and one another. Then people would say, but I thought you said, judgment is this and that only. And I said, no, wait a minute. There's one thing always certain in your process of self-development, awareness, is that there's always expansion. There's always change, like an onion that gets peeled. There's always more to discover and uncover and know. And this difference between judgment and non-judgment is no different to that. And, for a moment when I realized this, I was shocked, because I was like, oh man, I thought I had, this judgment thing under the belt, been walking with this for years. But then I realized that familiar inner dialogue, where, hey girl, remember, change is the one constant thing. And if you realize something, it's an opportunity for some more discovery, exploring. Look at this, it's something that you didn't know before. So get in there and understand it. So how this point opened up, basically, it was interesting because I didn't initially see my experience toward a certain group of people from that perspective. And that's just also something we tend to miss in our personal journeys in this life, that we cannot always see things by ourselves because we could be so kind of locked in a cocoon of an experience. Like I was that judgment to such an extent that I didn't even recognize it as judgment, because it's just always been such a natural part of me, until someone else who's been through a similar experience kind of knocked on my cocoon, on my shell, cracked it a bit and said, hey, hello, that little shell that you're in, that's judgment. I recognize it because I've been there. So, and what's also a good cross-reference for me is when someone can knock on my shell and open it up for me, and I realize it. It's truly a moment where it feels like you were coming out of a shell, like you had been so contained, and just that moment of realization and insight and getting what they're saying literally makes it feel like, okay, this darkness is breaking apart and the light is finally coming through. So essentially, it was a point where, and it was a difficult thing initially for me to face, and for a long time, I was relatively stable in it. It had to do with a point where, for me, in one of my principles, is that when connecting with people, I first and foremost, have a look at connecting with the person that they are. Get to know all that they are as a person, from the moment I meet them to their past, to their present, what's their future outlooks, get the whole perspective. So only then you could truly, to an extent, understand who that person is. But for many years in my life, I've been exposed to people who did not spend any time with getting to know me as a person, me as Sunette, my past, what I've been through, what I've experienced, what I've realized, who I am now, where I'm going. And despite not knowing any of that, still placed a judgment on, who I am, what I do. So truly, standing from the outside on the other side of this glass wall, looking at me like this and going, I see that. And then, kind of going through that glass wall and going, oh, look at that point. And then turning around, going to people, did you see that? Do you know that she did this and this and that and that? And the other consequence of that, obviously, is, their assumptions, interpretations, beliefs, opinions, reactions, disagreements of what they've just on the outside observed is then told to other people, who then join in with that, like, creating the spreading of essentially gossip. And, mentally, I've always known and understood, the whole process of that. But where I wasn't completely honest within myself was that there was still a slight wound in me, a very, very subtle movement right here in the center of my solar plexus, where every time I would physically see them, they'd be nice and they'd be smiling and they'd be okay, but then, others who also know them would share, look, I know you very well, so I'm just making you aware of this that's happening. So, also from that perspective, hearing it from others, you also don't know what's 100% true or not. But even within that whole process, it's not so much the point of the gossip and the speaking with others, and when you come face to face, they're smiling and they're nice. It's also more the fact that where I feel helpless and hopeless within it all is not having the opportunity for them to get to know me. So that point right there, that's what I would say pulled my heartstrings, if you will. There's a part of me that just wants to go to them and say, hey, just give me a chance, get to know me. Because many may be able to relate to this in varying different ways throughout your life as well. And it would be a good point for you to just honestly have a look. When you think back at those times, at those moments, when you see those people, what happens inside yourself? Do you still feel that slight movement happening in your solar plexus? It also, I found, came up toward my kidneys, up by my shoulder blades, along my spine. And I could feel my back tighten, and it happens very slightly. And also my shoulders up here. So there were definite physical signs, but over time, I just thought as well, okay, this is an experience I'm aware of, I acknowledge it, it's happening. At this time, I cannot do anything about it because I couldn't, practically and honestly, do anything about that immediate situation. All I could do was be myself, and that's what I accepted. And so within that acceptance, I got used to that acceptance and didn't really see the judgment I was actually still holding on. And what that judgment was, this I will continue with in the next video. How does all of that pertain to me holding on to a judgment in relation to them? And why is it that even ever so slight wound in myself couldn't really heal? So for this video, I'd like everyone to just honestly take that time to reflect on this particular case study or anything else similar where you've kind of just accepted it, acknowledge it, and you're okay with it, but there's still a slight wound inside yourself. And then we'll continue more in the next video. Thank you very much.